Forgot to put my mic on. It is still turned off. Hello. Can you tell me if the music is too loud? Because I can't really tell how much of it is coming through. I've dimmed it quite a bit. Like the volume should be a lot less loud than previous times, but still, maybe it's not enough. I was hacking away a little bit at the engine because I wanted to stop spawning the game window like this in front of my development window, because then I have to drag it out of the way. And it's actually really easy if you know what to do, but if you don't, boy, take some Googling. Hello. You have to adjust, you have to add a method here called glfw set window pos for window position and x and y, and link it to the glfw dll. Basically copy one or the other methods. And it will automatically call the method in the library for you. So right now I'm placing it 1,000 pixels to the right, 0 pixels down, so it won't appear in front of my other screens. Or at least it shouldn't, if I run it again. Nope. Good. Good. Exactly what I wanted. So, today I wanted to do it slightly differently than I have been doing it, because we've been messing around with a lot of functionality in the engine, which is kind of what people are supposed to be doing at this point, before you're actually building the game for the assignment. Get to know the tool you'll be using for building your game. But for now, I would like to make a very simple game, well, simple in concept, called Pong. I'm sure you guys know it. It's probably the first, if not one of the first games ever made. So should be easy, right? And I think I should be able to do that before midnight. But probably, yeah, should be enough time. So I should be able to finish a playable version of the game. So that does detect when the ball is outside of the field and should bounce the ball back correctly and stuff like that. So let's see. What I like to do first, whenever I'm creating a new game, is think of the types of objects I'll be using, I'll be needing for the game even. And in this case, there's only two types of objects, really. In Pong, you have the ball, basically, represented by a single pixel. Oh, that's good. So this might come in handy for you. Yeah. I'm not going to be making a full game with keeping track of scores and such, but I do want it to be completely functional. So in Pong, there's really only two things that are required to build the game, to actually play it. You have the paddle. There's two paddles, but it's only one type of object, because one paddle is in a different position, but it's still a paddle, so it could behave the same way, could have the same collision detection code and such. And the ball, like I said, which, if I recall correctly, bounces from the top and bottom side of the screen, not from the left and right side. Those are basically the goals that you have to defend if it's a tennis-like game. Every time scaling messes up. Better. Alright. So I was looking through all the assets I bought a while ago for paddles and whatnot, and the ball, and I found some. I found this ball. It's a bit big, I think. It's just a circle. Any ball will do. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that to my GXPEngine bin debug directory, which is mostly empty now. I've also found two paddles, two slightly different ones, because I want to be able to distinguish between player 1 and player 2. Is the syntax similar to processing, and is there a library we can look up functions, etc.? The syntax of C# is similar to the syntax of Java. Very similar in a lot of ways. There are obviously a bunch of differences, but language-wise, it's okay. There's a lot of stuff that you can do in processing syntactually that will also work in C#. However, the library we're using right now, even it has a processing-like functionality built in, so that you can relatively easily draw rectangles, circles, arcs, and all that stuff that processing does. Also draw text on the screen and whatnot. But the GXPEngine is fundamentally different from processing. It is focused more on building 2D games, and processing is more for drawing exercises. It's really a learning tool. And though the GXPEngine is also a learning tool, it's way more aimed towards game development. And you can, and there has been games released or semi-released with it. And one of the teachers got it to run on Android as well, so I guess you could. So syntactually speaking, it will be similar to processing, but we'll be using C#, and I will be going full-on object-oriented programming, and not as much functional-ish programming that processing kind of requires. Let me just show you the paddles. Also slightly big. Might have to scale them down a little bit. Yeah. Even if you're colorblind, you should be able to see the differences because of the nice different curve to that. Oh, and is there a library we can look up functions? There is, yes. Included with the download for the GXPEngine, there is a generated HTML library. Basically, you have to open the index.html with Chrome or Firefox or something similar. And you'll be able to browse to most of the functionality the GXPEngine has. It's similar to the API docs that processing has. But it's not completely up to date yet. We've added a bunch of new functionality to the GXPEngine, which hasn't been documented yet. But we will as soon as we've fully tested and implemented it. Right now we're hosting the GXPEngine on a Bitbucket repository as well, which we were planning on perhaps using for something like that as well. Basically hosting a wiki and an issue tracker and stuff like that. But that's all in the initial phases. Good evening. So, as I was saying, two different types of objects, I think. One of them is going to be the ball. I'm just going to create an empty class ball. Doesn't do anything yet. And the other one is going to be the paddle. It might be good that you're doing something very similar to this. Though I don't want to spoil everything. It might be if you can follow along with this without being able to guess what the classes will be and such. You should be able to have a decent idea of how the object-oriented part of this would work. So the ball will be just a sprite. It will inherit from sprites, and it'll use the ball.png. The paddle will also be a sprite. I don't think they have animations attached to them anyway. I haven't had any trouble with Visual Studio Community crashing in a while. Let's keep it that way. It has been updated. Paddle1.png. Right. Oh yeah, forgot to make it a Spark. Yeah, I won't mention it again until it starts crashing. That'll be sad. So, from now on, by the way, I will be using the correct syntax as I showed during the lecture. Like, I will mark everything as private that needs to be private and public that needs to be public and all that stuff. So, from now on, I expect you guys to do that as well in the future. So we have a paddle player 1, because in this game, I guess the paddles are players. Paddle player 2. I guess you could just use 1 and 2 as a number as well. Doesn't matter much in this case. Autocomplete is a bit finicky. It's a new paddle. Paddle player 2 is also a new paddle. We need a ball. Private ball. In this case, by the way, I'm doing everything in the game, or at least the game will be responsible for loading it and such. Because, well, if you know Pong, it doesn't really have levels. It's more or less the speed goes up. But yes, I am making Pong, like the actual Pong. Yeah, it doesn't really have levels, so I think it's okay to have it in the main game for this case. Yeah, I thought let's make a game fully instead of parts of a game, or just showing how different functionalities work. Because as I said before, I think now you should be at the point where you should be able to create a full game loop, and it has some requirements. But I think Pong is a good example of how to create a full game loop that doesn't require too much time, if you kind of know what you're planning on doing. Let's not forget to add everything. The ball, player 1, and child player 2. Let's quickly see what that looks like. A mess. Yes, that's kind of what I was expecting. Also, they're way too big. I guess I could scale down the images or just have the thingy be slightly smaller. We want the ball to be centered around its middle. Centered around its center, I guess. First, let's put the origin in the middle. Width divided by 2, height divided by 2. And scale it down a bit. 20% of its original size is probably already enough. Same goes for the paddles. I guess you want them in the middle as well. Yeah. Let's see if that's a more reasonable size. Seems like it, can't really tell because they're stuck in the corner. So let's place them in places. If you know the rules of Pong, you know that after it goes off screen, one of the players scores a point, depending on who missed it or who shot it last. And the ball goes back into the center of the screen and moves in a certain direction after a small timeout. So it's good to probably give the ball a reset method, which places it back in the middle. X is game.width divided by 2, and Y is game.height divided by 2. So it places it slapdash in the middle of the screen. Yeah. So after we've created a ball, we immediately call reset on ourselves, so we get placed in the middle. Let's see if that works. Should work. Yeah. Looks like a crosshair. Right. The paddles we can place manually. Let's place player 1 128 pixels from the left, and let's place player 2 128 pixels from the right, which means we have to deduct it from the width. Notice that width, by the way, in your game class refers to the game's entire width, so the width of your screen. So width minus 128 is 128 pixels from the right. I think that should work. I always run it all the time. Yes! This seemed like reasonable locations. Yeah, they do have the same sprite still, and I want to change that. So let's have the paddle know which player it is. So by including the player number in the constructor, we require a paddle when it's made to be also passed in a player number. You can see that the IDE now throws an error here as well. There's no argument given that corresponds to the required formal parameter player number. So this one we're going to give the number 1, and this one we're going to give the number 2, so that they know which player number they are. And I guess we can immediately use that here, because I've already created 2 sprites called paddle1.png and paddle2.png, and I'll be initializing the sprite with whichever number they get. So now they should both have a different sprite. Well, they're still on top of the screen, but you can tell they both have their own sprite now, which helps distinguish them quite a bit. Right. Okay. Gonna quickly remove the paddles again, because first I want to focus on the ball. The ball has a bunch of functionality. It's not as easy as you might think. It's not super difficult, but so it starts in the middle, then heads in a certain direction. So to do that, we need to keep track of which direction we're going, I guess. Or even better, with which speed we're going over the X and Y axes. So I'll just create private float X speed and private float Y speed. And let's put them at something. It's going to be in pixels per second, so 265 pixels per second is not super fast, but also not super slow. So in the first case, during the update, we're just going to add X speed and Y speed. Oops, speed times delta time. If you recall, time to delta time is the amount of milliseconds that passed between the previous frame render and this one. And it's the amount of milliseconds, so it'll be 16 or 17 or 14 if you're running at 60 FPS, which this screen is. So to get a number to get it in seconds, I have to divide it by 1,000. Let's see, so float delta time equals time to delta time divided by 1,000. Make it a float. And now if we multiply the speed we have with the delta time, it should move at 265 pixels per second instead of 265 pixels per frame. Let's see if that kind of works. Yeah, that seems fine. Right, so what do we want to happen? The origin is in the middle. So you can see it goes through the bottom and it just keeps going, and it will keep going forever. So when it hits the bottom of the screen, we want it to bounce in the other direction. And because we have an X speed and a Y speed, this could be relatively easily done. Let's see. So if our Y position is larger than the game.height, that means you're completely off screen. But you got to keep in mind that our center is where the X and Y positions are. So we have to be off screen minus our own height divided by 2. That means that we are touching the bottom of the screen. Yeah. And in this case, we'll just flip Y speed. You can do it in several ways. You can multiply it with -1, because if it is a positive number, it will become a negative number. If it's a negative number, it will become a positive number. Another way might be a little bit more easy to understand, is just Y speed equals minus Y speed. Result is the same. All right, let's see. It should bounce off the floor now, if I'm not mistaken. Bing. Yes. Still keeps going off screen, but for now, this is what we need. If we want to keep it on the screen, we also want to check the X position. So if the X position is larger than the game.width minus our width divided by 2, X speed is going to be minus our X speed. Basically flip that. Ding ding. Nice. And there it goes. Because we haven't checked for the top yet. I should keep track of this. First, bottom. Right. Let's now check the top. If our Y position is smaller than our own height divided by 2. Because the closer we get to the top, the closer it will be to 0. So our own height divided by 2 is when we should reach the top, when we're actually bouncing there. And then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to Y speed equals minus Y speed. Where is it? Like this. Dink. Top. Yeah. Right, one more. The left side. If our X value is smaller than our width divided by 2. Well, this is easier than I thought. Because if this works in one place, it works in all places, basically. Whoops, X speed. Yep. Gonna crank the speed a little bit to see how it goes. Actually, no, this is fine. I don't think the frame rate is high enough to crank it too much. It should stay on the screen now. Nice. Keeps on going. Alright, it stays on the screen. However, this does run into one of the problems you may have seen. Well, this looks like the DVD screensaver. If you replace this image with a DVD screensaver image, then you can keep waiting until it hits one of the corners. There's a small problem that we've run into with other versions of the engine as well, which is that the Y speed, or because you're already over the game height when you're flipping the speed. So to correct that, first we set the Y to game.height minus our own height divided by 2. So as soon as we notice we're over it, we clamp it back onto it so that we don't get too far off screen. Otherwise you get slightly unexpected consequences. Just ask Hans. He's been making a 3D version of Pong, and online, mind you, which runs into some issues if collisions happen too fast or have weird, unexpected consequences. So in this case we do the same thing. When we hit the top, we move it back slightly. Oh god, I got stuck in the bottom. See, this is what I mean. This is what could happen. So, I don't think we need the right and left one. This, however, the Y speed equals, we can use that. That is something we'll be using in different places. So maybe make a method for that. Bounce bounce vertical is this one. Just Y speed equals minus Y speed, and let's also, it escaped. Bounce horizontal, which was X speed equals minus X speed. Yep, so in this case we'll just call bounce vertical. If you have to do something more than once, it's probably good to make a method out of it, so you don't have to change it in several places, if something has to change. The left and right one right here. I don't think we need it, because in Pong it doesn't matter. Only the vertical sides bounce, so you can only bounce off the top and the bottom, I think. This should still work if I run it again. Should bounce there and then go off screen. Great. Now, the paddles. What should they do? I would say you can control one with just pick up. Wow, I never really thought about that. Yeah. However, I guess it is a 2D game with 3D graphics. So it is played on a 2D playing field, but it has 3D objects. Looks quite nice. A lot of animations and such. But yeah, I guess if you add a third dimension to Pong, you just basically add the bouncing, which makes it a 3D game. There used to be a Flash game that was basically 3D Pong, where you see the ball come towards you and become bigger, then bounces off again, becomes smaller, hits something. That was actually pretty well made. No actual 3D, just a simple effect, with using scaling to create a 3D version of Pong. The further it was away from you, the smaller it would get. AI was pretty smart. I believe that version had some sort of angle you could give as well. So if you moved your paddle really fast while hitting the ball, you could give like an effect, and it would curve over the course of its trajectory. For now, though, let's keep it simple and have our paddle move with the mouse. Yeah, I guess you could say you can control one of the paddles with the keyboard and the other one with the mouse, or one with W and S and the other one with arrow up and arrow down. So you can have two people at the same computer. But because I'm the tester, I will, oops, forgot to add my paddles. I just want to move them together so it's easier for me to test. Right, they move with the mouse now. Nicely centered around it as well. Sweet. Ball just slowly goes off screen. That's it. What else do we want the paddle to do? For now, nothing, I think. Just something simple like this. The ball, however, does need some more functionality. And for that, I'm going to use the dreaded on-collision method, which is, as I mentioned during the lecture, it's very good for games that don't have a lot of objects, or if you just want to prototype, which this case for sure. A Steam controller with gyro controls. Sure. Just give me the drivers. I don't have Stream controllers. I was, however, looking into using these controllers. I don't know if you can see. They're for the Oculus, and they should be readable in much the same way that the Xbox controllers are readable. However, I haven't really gotten them to work. They have a bunch of special inputs similar to the Steam controller, where you have to just touch the button. You don't have to press it, but it will detect if there's a finger on top of it as well. Similar for some of the other controls. I think you can do some neat stuff with this. I'll probably be using it for the game jam. I'm not sure what I'll be doing with it yet. Probably be using a different engine though, depending on what type of game we'll be making. So, on collision with the other, what are you going to do first? Check if we're colliding with a paddle. Now, you don't really have to check this, because you're always colliding with a paddle, because you're not colliding with yourself and the only other objects on the screen are paddles. But let's assume maybe later on you have several balls on the screen or something like that. So then you want them maybe not to collide with each other, or you have score on the screen and you don't want to collide with that if that's something that has a sprite or a collider attached. So we're just going to check if the other is a paddle, and if so, paddle equals the other cast as a paddle. And like I found out recently, you can do it like this, which ends up in the exact same thing. You have a variable called paddle, which is a paddle, but only if it is a paddle. Man, try saying that like 20 times fast. So if the other is a paddle, we bounce horizontally, I guess. Let's see what that does. Probably glitches a bit. Actually, it works pretty well. I guess you could get stuck. No, wow, it seems to work pretty well actually. Did not expect it. So now we already have most of the basics of Pong working. However, this could go wrong, I think, if the ball has a higher speed. You could get stuck in the paddle. Yeah, like that, if it flew through it. I don't know if it captures it on the stream, but... The code? Will this be posted somewhere? You mean the code or the stream? The VOD of the stream. I'm going to make a small correction with this because we don't want it to get stuck in the paddle or something. So as soon as we collide with a paddle, we want to correct the position we have and have it bounce off of the corrected position, basically, so we don't get stuck in a paddle, which is what happened for 1 or 2 frames every now and again when I was moving the paddles really fast. So what we could do is first we check our x velocity, or x speed, I think I called it, yes. If that is larger than 0, that means that we're heading to the right. Going to the right, meaning we hit paddles from the left, I guess. So if we're going to the right and we hit a paddle, that means that we're hitting the blue one from the left, basically. Because there's no way you can be hitting the blue one from the right, because there's no bounce back behind it. Huh. So that's good to know. So if we're going to the right and when we're hitting a paddle, we're going to set our x position to the paddle's x position minus, let's see, the paddle dot width divided by 2, because the origin is in the middle, minus our own width divided by 2. So basically we're placing ourselves just outside of the paddle, and then we bounce horizontal. I should rename this to bounce horizontally. Sounds more natural. Easy way to rename it. Wow. Command R renames. Did not know that. That is quite useful. Bounce in the other direction. Alright. If we're not going to the right, that means we're going to the left. I love it when games are simple like this. In that case, we do the same thing from the other direction. So our x position will be corrected to the paddle's x position plus its width, so just to the right of the paddle, plus our own width divided by 2, so plus our own half width. Oh, forgot to bounce. And we also bounce horizontally. I guess we could just always do that. So I'll just do it here, because that has to be executed whenever we hit a paddle anyway. Alright, let's see how that goes. Okay. Better. So now if I try to hit it from the side, it will auto-correct itself a little bit and move back into the middle. Nice. Tink. Wow, this is a lot of the gameplay of Pong already. Of course we can make it speed up over time or something like that. First though, now it goes off screen and the game is just meh. Nothing happens. So let's have the game do some checks for us. Let's have the game check every update, like, is the ball still in play? If not, reset it. Oh, I think the music stopped. Something simple. Sure, why not? Is the ball still in play? If not, reset. So we already gave the ball a reset method that puts it back in the middle. That's good. We do need a public void is in play. Place? No. Play. Meaning that it's still inside of the game. That should return a boolean. And if our x position is smaller than our own half width, I guess, or just maybe smaller than 0. So we can wait until it's partially off screen. Or the x position is larger than the game dot width, return true. Otherwise, return false. A nice little shorthand for this is basically what we're doing here is we're checking like, hey, if this entire statement is true, return true. If this entire statement is false, return false. So why not return this statement, which will be either true or false anyway. There. So if our x position is smaller than 0 or larger than the game dot width, should rename this to is not in play, then we're not in play because it's easier to check, I guess. So if in the update here we can check if ball dot is not in play, ball dot reset. So now if it goes off screen, it should go back to the middle, I think. Yep, keeps going. That's nice. But now at least there's no memory leaks or anything. If we let it go off screen, it just starts in the middle again and keeps going in the way it was already going. That's nice, but we kind of want it to wait in the middle a little bit so you can get your bearings. Is this what we're going to be doing next quarter? What do you mean? Making a game? Making an arcade type of game? I mean, you will be making an arcade game. Not sure if Pong will be good enough, but you will be making an arcade game for the arcade machine. Well, you should be programming in this already for the past month or two. Unless you're not in the engineering streamline course. Can't think of the word we use. Oh, you're an artist. No, you don't have to worry. You won't be working in this unless you want to, but your programmers will be working with this. The people in your team that will be doing the programming. You won't have to. I mean, it's good if you can. Oh man, no. It's just for the game engineers. No, they've already been working with this for a while now, so they should be slightly more familiar with it. So if this seems all kind of weird to you, that's probably fine because this is all new to you guys. Yeah, I mean it's good to keep a little bit of this in mind because C# is what you'll be using during Unity, which is at the end of this year. Even the artists will have a little bit of Unity. Mark will make sure that you guys will do that. Yeah, that's when the real programming horror starts, when your software works against you. No, but as an artist, this no, you don't have to be scared. This is not something you have to know. Though I would say it's good knowledge for anybody. Being able to understand, semi-understand what the programmers are doing. The game design course engine is very limited. Oh yes, I think you guys are using the engine that Paul made, Paul and I, over the course of the last 2 years, based on the GXPEngine. So basically, it's like a 2D platforming engine, right? Which is built in the GXPEngine. Yeah, yes. Yeah, that is more limited. Of course, it's more focused towards level design and how to communicate to the player through good level design. Not as much like programming a simple game, because that entire engine is made in the GXPEngine. So technically, if you know how to program, you can find the source code and you can alter it in certain ways if you like. It is quite complex though, as is already. Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad that clears something up. Last year, a lot of people thought the same thing. They thought they had to, well, even worse, they thought they had to make a platformer in the GXPEngine themselves, and were not allowed to use the other engine, which I don't know why, but they also call it the GXPEngine. It's like calling every game made with Unity, Unity. Or like calling every game made in the Unreal Engine, Unreal. Like Bioshock is made in the Unreal Engine, so let's call it Unreal. Now, GXPEngine is obviously the engine. And it's called the platformer engine, I think. The one that's actually being used for game design. Yes. Alright, let's see if I can finish this. GDE framework. Maybe. It's still, like last year it was still called the platformer engine, but that's the one I made. But Paul made some significant improvements, and I think so much so that maybe it's been renamed to something else. It has some extra functionality now, which are more aimed towards game design and less towards level design. The previous version was also used to make sprites and such, for sprite sheets, and have artists be able to test their walking animations and jumping animations and enemy animations. This one is more aimed towards actual game design. So slightly different goals, I guess, as well. So yeah, this might all seem a little bit confusing to the people that have not done any of the programming before. Don't worry, you don't have to know any of this. Yeah, not yet. I'll be doing the Unity lectures later this year as well. And the game designers will join in for that. And also Mark will be doing the other Unity, the more aimed towards the Unity art stuff. Oh yeah, programming on a logical level is all quite similar. However, you can make it as complex as you want. Let's see. The artists don't have to learn much about the code for Unity, but a little bit, because you'll need it if you want to do some dynamic lighting and such. Not yet, but I do think some of my colleagues want to join in and also do live streams again. I know Mark has done live streams for 3D modeling and such in the past. I think, well, he's busy with his master right now, but I think he was still interested in doing stuff like this. I'll at least be keeping this up for some more time. But yeah, it'll be mostly focused on engineering. Oh yeah, it's on YouTube, I think. as are mine. I see some people have found them already, even though I didn't list them. But Mark posted it on the Facebook page as well. So if you go digging through there, you might be able to find it if you go back far enough. I do think a lot of people still use it as a reference point. Yes. And like I said, I know some of my colleagues want to try this as well. Because it's a nice way to get some extra information out for the people that are interested. For now though, I'm going to introduce a state to the ball. Because I feel like it could be in two different states. Namely, pre-game and in-game. Remember the enum that we talked about during the lecture this week? So let's say by default it's pre-game, and after a while it will automatically switch to in-game. So we can do that here. If the state pre-game equals the current state, so if the current state equals pre-game, same thing, just other way around. Let's introduce a counter. And let's do it correctly, let's make it a float. 0.0. Gonna need the delta time for this, might as well put it here. If counter plus equals delta time is larger than 2.0, that means larger than or equal to. Oh, let's do it like this. First add some time to the counter and then check. Because otherwise I have to do some code magic. So if it's larger than 2 seconds or 2.0, that means 2 seconds have passed, and then we're going to set our current state to state.inGame. And all the movements of this game will only happen if the current state is in game. I guess I can remove the horizontal part. So we split it up into two pieces. The counter will start at 0. I typed it here, but it should be at the top here with all the other private variables. While the game is in the pre-game state, or the ball is in the pre-game state, it will count, it will wait, and as soon as 2 seconds have passed, it will move to the other state. It will move to the state in game. Yep. And when it's in game, it moves over the X speed and Y speed and does all the nice bouncing around and such. Let's outline this a little bit. There we go. Now, when we reset, we also want to reset the state, I guess. So we set the state back to state.pregame. And also, the counter should start at 0 again. Oh no, it's starting to crash again. Oh no, I jinxed it, didn't I? I've waited too long. Caused some problems here. Now it's back. Alright, so when we start the game, the ball will call reset on itself. The state will be pre-game, the counter will be at 0, and it will count to 2 before it moves on to the in-game state, in which it will also do the movement and such. Let's see if that works. One, two, boom. Yeah, oh, there it goes. Off screen. Oh, and it goes back to the middle of the screen. And it keeps going. If I keep my paddles here, I should never be able to hit it. Notice that it flies towards, or it keeps going in the direction it was already going, because we don't reset the X and Y speed. But I think that might be okay. Because basically, if a person misses the ball, you give them the first opportunity to bounce it back after 2 seconds. So and we let it go off of this side of the screen, goes back to the middle, and it'll keep moving in that way. Yep, yeah, seems to work fine. I think this could be considered a working version of Pong. Of course, I'm playing it with one person, and I'm moving both the paddles at the same time, but still. So if you want to detect who scored, I think you only have to look at the location of the ball, basically. Yes, let's make it multiplayer. I guess you could make it single screen multiplayer. That could work. I mean, by using keyboard for the one and mouse for the other, perhaps. We already have access to the player number, which is either 1 or 2. So based on that, we could either listen to... in fact, let's see. In the paddle, right here, well, we have to store it. So private int player number here. Store it here so that we can access it in different methods. If our player number equals 1, we use the mouse. So not only player 1 should move with the mouse. Yep. Player 2 just stays on top of the screen. No, I have a little chat thingy here on the on this screen. It's slightly too small for me to read. So I have to like look in close. Of course I can make the font slightly bigger, but who wants that? No, I don't have notes. I'm just freeballing. I did try to make something like this before, not in the like a little while ago, so I kind of know what I'm doing. But I figured I should be able to build Pong though. I mean, when you're teaching game engineering, basically, or in my case in Unity. But yeah, you can do whatever you like. You can start with a simple game like Pong, and then expand on it. For example, maybe you'll have the scaling of the paddle update over time. Like maybe your paddle becomes smaller and smaller. Or every time you hit the ball back, you become slightly bigger. Something like that. You can think of a lot of stuff. In fact, let's do something like that. Yeah, add power-ups. Power-ups are always a fun and way to increase gameplay possibilities, I think. Hit by ball. So we can figure out what to do with this later on. Oh yeah, when you're the last person to hit the ball, basically. Which technically you can kind of know which person was the last person to hit the ball based on which direction the ball is going. If it's going to the left, your player 2 hit it last. If it's going to the right, player 1 hit it last, etc. After the start of the game, that is. In this case, we already have a paddle. I'm also gonna call the let the paddle know it's been hit. Not hit by ball, a method I just created. And I'm gonna multiply my skill by 0.8. So I'm gonna remove 20% of my skill every time I hit the ball, making it difficult over time. Let's see, I don't know if this works immediately. Yep. Think. So yeah, this makes the game way more difficult over time. Every time the ball hits the paddle, it becomes smaller. Whoops. It actually becomes quite difficult to play pretty quickly. Of course, because it's a percentage, the amount it will shrink in pixels becomes smaller and smaller, but they're getting pretty hard to see now. It's just like two little white stripes on my screen. Whoops. Yeah. Yeah. That should probably reset when the when the player resets as well. In fact, let's give it a method reset, which we call here on the ball in the game, but we should also call it on the paddle of player 2 and 1. So as soon as the game is over, it resets. And in this case, set the scale back to 0.2. Because it's already pretty small, because the original images are so large. Can the GXPEngine detect multiple key presses at the same time, kind of like shortcuts? Yes, it can. And I'll show you how. You can... no, I'm just going to do it in the paddle for now. So, if you want to detect if, for example, if the player is pressing the shift key, you do get key dot left shift, and input dot get key down, for example. So at the moment something else is pressed. Key dot A. So now you have to press shift and A to do something. So when they're both pressed, this will execute. Yes. Notice that I use get key for left shift and get key down for A. This does not work if you press A first. You could make it work if you press A first by just doing this as well. So get key returns if the current key is pressed, or if the key is currently pressed. Doesn't matter when it was pressed. As long as the button is still held down, this will return true. Get key down will only trigger once the frame that the button was pressed in. After that, it doesn't trigger anymore. So by using it for shift, so we just check if shift is pressed at all, and using get key down for A, we know if shift is being held down at this point and A is being pressed. But it will only trigger once. If you want it to trigger several times, just use get key. This just means that get key shift, so shift is pressed and A are pressed at the same time. Then it also doesn't matter if you press A first and then shift. Yeah, and you can make this as long as you like. You can add more buttons as well. So if you want to also check if get key down, well, get key dot C as well. So now you have to press left shift and A and C at the same time. Otherwise this doesn't work. This is used a lot, for example, if you want to speed up or slow down. You can see that people use shift for sprint functionality. So you check if shift and W are pressed to kind of increase your movement speed forward, for example. Yeah. And I think, let's see, key dots. We have a lot of keys supported. Left shift, right shift, alt, left alt, right alt as well. Control, or maybe, yeah, left control and right control as well. There's a command key on Mac that I don't think is supported, which is the Windows key on any Windows keyboard. It's called the super key by most other thing. It's not here. Oh, maybe it's Windows or something? Nah, that doesn't seem to be here. That thing with the sprinting will work better if the second key is key down, right? Yeah, most likely. It depends a bit on how you want to implement it. But if you want to apply a certain movement every draw, every frame, then yes, you'll have to keep both buttons pressed anyway. So either you keep track of the button being pressed or you let the engine keep track of it. So if you use get key down instead of just the other one, that's probably better. Escape 911, left alt, right alt, square bracket, semicolon, dot, question mark. Yeah, it doesn't seem to be here. Yeah. It's pretty useful. You can also include a key, for example, let's add a reset method to the entire game. Which is basically what's happening here. When the ball is not in play, the game gets reset. So if we add an update method, and for the people that are coming straight from processing, the update method is basically the same as the draw method in oh, there's already an update method. Whoops. Is pretty much exactly the same as the draw method in processing. So if ball is not in play, or input dot get key. Yeah, let's try it. Key dot shift, left shift, and input dot get key down key dot r for reset. I'm putting some extra brackets around it here so that you can see. So this if will trigger if the ball is not in play, or the left shift and the R button are pressed in the same frame. I'm just putting it below each other to make it look a little bit more obvious. Alright, so if I play this, I haven't actually tested this. So if it starts moving and I press Shift R, yeah, it resets the game. Shift R. And if I press just R, nothing happens. If I press just Shift, nothing happens. Shift R resets it. Same as when it would go off screen. Yeah. Well, I mentioned during the lab that I think I should be able to make Pong in an hour, and I think I did. I guess you could also make the ball smaller every time, or bigger, every time it hits a paddle. You can think of a lot of different things you can add to Pong to make it more interesting. Maybe. What could we do that's interesting? Maybe add another ball every now and again. Nah. If we add more than one ball, we increase the difficulty for this program quite a bit. Because you have to keep track if all the balls are in play or not. Okay, I'm gonna see. Because I have to stop soon. It's already past 9. But buoyancy. What's that? You mean like you can, if the paddle is moving, it gives some sort of like curve or effect to the thing? Let's say if you wanted to make a fighting game and you have certain key combo you have to press to do an attack. How would you do that? I would do that differently. That it wiggles when it hits the ball. Oh, I see what you mean. You mean the paddle, like it gets like hit. It shakes when you hit the ball. I think. Yeah, instead of just scaling it down. That might be a good idea. First let's say if you want to make a fighting game and you have certain key combo you have to press to do an attack. How would you do that? Well, in fighting games, it's often not about which buttons you press at the same time, but more in the sequence in which you press them and how fast you press them. I think if you leave more than a certain amount of milliseconds between presses, it doesn't count as a combo. So to do that, you have to do it slightly differently. You'll have to keep track of... What I would do is I would create a list of the buttons that would make up the combo. And whenever the first button of that list is pressed, I would count down. And if within that amount of time the second button is pressed, I would start the countdown again and move on to the third button. And if within that countdown the third button is pressed, then you do a certain move. But if any of that fails, if you wait too long, for example, or if you press the wrong button, it gets reset completely. Like you start at the beginning of the list of the buttons again. And the timer has been reset as well. Yeah. That way, you can also make a list of, for example, 3 times the same button. So you press it once, you have a certain amount of time to press it again, you have a certain amount of time to press it again. I think in God of War, for example, there's a lot of combos that require you to press the same button several times in a sequence. Yeah, I think that would be probably one of the easier way to do this. You can make a list of keys like this. Keys to press for combo. And then I have to include collection.generic, otherwise it doesn't work. But yeah, that is correct. If you want to be even more meticulous about it, a queue is perfect. A queue or a stack, I guess, is perfect for keeping track of inputs. Because it would automatically move on to the next input if you use it correctly by removing it, popping it from the top of the stack of the queue. So basically every time the right button is pressed, you move it from the list and check what the next button is. So you do have to keep track of, or like reset it back to its original state. But a queue is very good for keeping track of several inputs that have to come sequentially. Yeah, a queue is a sort of data pattern similar to list, but it has some limitations / features that make it more suited towards stuff like this. A queue and a stack are very similar to list, both of them, just slightly different. If you're animated, you can check at the end of every animation, I guess. Yeah, true. If you have, it depends a bit on what type of fighting game. If you do the, oh yes, it's I wouldn't say literally the same, but pretty much exactly the same thing. It has the same methods and it functions in very much the same way. You often use a list if you don't know exactly how large it's going to be. It's also easier to create a list and fill it up than it is, for example, to create an array and fill it up. You could also do it like this, have a key array of the keys you have to press for a combo. And then initialize that as a, I think like this, key.A, key.A, B, key.C. I'm not sure if this works. I forgot, I think I have to do it slightly differently on you. Doesn't help that it's already a type as well. With the list of key, you can just do something like this keys to press for combo dots. Well, first off, it's a new list of keys, because otherwise we get a null pointer. Keys to press for, don't crash on me. Keys to press for combo dot add key dot a. Actually, come to think of it, these are just numbers probably. Yep, it's just integers. So it's going to be a list of integers. So key.a, key.q, and key.t, for example. So now you have to press AQT. Or at least, and every time somebody presses the right button, you check which one is in front by doing something like this. Similar to array list again. Key to press for combo 0. That's the first object, if there is at least one object in there. Right? Does this work? Oh yeah, and key. Maybe it has a first even. Nah, it doesn't seem to have it. So you would have to check if the count, which is the amount of things it has, is larger than 0 before you do it. Because otherwise you might try to access an object that's not really there. To make it more extendable, I would suggest to use a IEnumerable. Yes. I mean, I wouldn't recommend first or second quartile students, unless they know what it is, to use it. But if I were to make something like this, I would highly consider it like making my own simple linked list style combo generator or something like that. which has a bunch of keys that have to be pressed in order. Maybe even include the timeout that's needed, or maximum timeout in between keys. Because I know, for example, in God of War and in Devil May Cry, there's a combo that you press X 3 times in a row, right? But there's also a combo where you press X 3 times in a row, but the last time you wait half a second, so X, 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 instead of X, X, X. So then maybe you could even include the timeout, for example. If you make your own IE numerable type as such as well, you can make some pretty complex features. And you can go full Magica with it as well. I don't know if you've ever played that game, but you basically use, I think, up to 10 different buttons. When the students get to Unity, you don't need to do programming to make a combo system. Yeah, that's true, right? The input manager, you can basically say like, hey, the fire button is actually not left mouse, but it's Control-Shift-Q. Yeah, Unity has a bunch of stuff built in for key combinations and such. Yeah, or use the animator. I wasn't a big fan of the animator at first because I did a lot of pixel, like frame by frame animations and such. But if you get used to it and you use the state machines behind it, it can be very, very, very powerful in Unity. Not next quartile, but the quartile after that, I'll be doing Unity streams probably as well. So we can see what we can do with that. For now. Yeah. Yeah, I could try to add some power-ups, some multiple balls or something, but I think it'll be too late. Will the students learn editor scripting this year? That's a good question. I actually made a list of the stuff that the students will be learning. I don't know if I have it on this computer. It's somewhere on the Unity 3D 6-pager. I don't have it here. So editor scripting for the students that haven't used Unity yet is basically you can build your own tools to be used in Unity. It already has a bunch of stuff that allows you to create game objects and other easy to use, handy to use methods. But with editor scripting, you can make your own. And basically stuff like generating a grid or something, stuff that you want to automate, it's very easy to do in Unity. It is very powerful. No, I'm not sure if I want it to be part of the intro to Unity. Maybe near the end, though. Maybe near the end I can mention for the people that do follow along quite nicely. You could not make it mandatory, but make it something that people can use if they're interested in it. I know I use it all the time. If only like to just add a button to reset the stored high scores or something. It saves so much work in the end. You create a class once, and then later on you don't have to go to the files and delete some and such. You have access to my DevOps. Oh, I think I received an email from you. I don't know if I've accepted it yet, but you've created a Microsoft, was it Microsoft? DevOps environment, right? I've been pretty busy this vacation building another game and also visiting family and holidays and whatnot. I'm also about to be finished with my second full released game. The other one I made in 4 days, and it took another 3 days to release on iOS and Android. This one, it took a little bit longer. But I will try and see if I can release it within a week or two as well. I haven't checked it yet, but I will. Because I've been working on Bitbucket as well. As you might have noticed, GitHub has gone free, or at least a lot more free. Which brings some implications. I feel like Bitbucket will probably make some changes as well. Some interesting changes, maybe allowing you to have more people in your team or something to keep up with what GitHub, or to stay ahead of what GitHub is offering. Because I did read about the new law that was passed in Australia, where Bitbucket and such is located, that basically allows the Australian government to seize your code and change your code to make like backdoors in your software. Technically, of course, if something, and it won't show up in your commit logs or anything. It will just like they'll edit it on the server. They are allowed to do that now. Even if it's not an open source project, even if it's a private one. So, very, very shady. Like, Australia has been doing some weird stuff for everything related with technology, really. So I've been looking into setting up a GitLab or something as an alternative to Bitbucket for specifically hosting the GXPEngine and giving the students access to it. Yeah, I do hear, dude. I haven't checked it yet. I'll have a look at your email later and see what it's what it looks like nowadays and such. Because I remember Azure, I think, looking really promising when it was in beta, and then I heard nothing from it for like months and months. But I think it might have like kind of developed into this. Yeah. Though I must say, GitLab looks very promising, with like the included tools for Scrum and such as well. I'm going to look in Azure as well, because we as Saxion has bought few accounts, like a few giant accounts with Microsoft, so maybe they can give us like special access to Azure as well, give us some more space with that. That would be awesome. Also, some students, some second year students recommended UTrack, which is made by the people that made JetBrains and such. You can host it yourself, and it also has like, it's an issue tracker with Scrum and such built in, and sort of a Trello built in as well. Looks very cool, and I'm a big fan of what the JetBrains people are doing. I met a few of the developers a few years ago, and they were assholes. But their software was really nice. They were really... the guy that I met at a con was really dickish. But the software is really nice. Oh, yeah, stuff like that is awesome. Though I must say, I haven't run into problems with Unity taking too long to build yet. During the game jam last year, though, that game started... taking some time. Would be nice if I could do that in the background while I keep working on some code or something. All right, I'm gonna be off. I have some stuff to do. Thank you all for watching. I know it's a post vacation stream, so I'm sure a lot of people are still getting back to the country. I saw actually we were missing some people during the lectures. Most people were missing people during the lectures. A lot of teachers were. So, yeah. Next week there'll be another stream. Next week's topic is levels. So maybe I can build a simple game that has a few different levels that we can switch between. I will be explaining during the lecture how we do it anyway. Alright, everybody, have a good night. Take care. And see you during the next stream, and maybe during the labs and lectures if you decide to show up. Which you should. Even if you think it's easy. Probably better to get a little too much information than too little. Alright. Have a good night. Bye.